Sonic Free is the best one yet, but it is also my favorite movie of this entire year. Today, I just wanted to give my thoughts on the newest Sonic movie, and if you like watching me talk about Sonic, then you should definitely subscribe and like the video to see more Sonic content from me. I'm gonna split this video into two halves. The first half will be spoiler-free, and then the second half of the video will be filled with spoilers. So when we get to the second half, I will warn you to leave the video. So starting off with my many positives for this movie, I will say this is a very worthy adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2. They do make things a little different and they take a lot of creative liberties, but it is done in a way where it is exciting, and I actually like the different things they do with the story this time around. And I will say, while they do change Shadow's backstory quite a bit, I think Shadow is done justice in this movie. And I really love Keanu Reeves' performance as the character. He did an incredible job. Another thing I really loved about this movie was the story. Much like the original Sonic Adventure 2, the story is split into 3 sections. The hero story with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles and the humans, and the dark story, focusing on the 2 Robotniks and Shadow, and then coming together for the final story. And I think this really works for the movie. Having the movie be structured kind of like the original SA2 really helps with the pacing, which I will talk about later. But before getting into my negatives and things I'm a little mixed on, I will say the final positive for this movie, and arguably the movie's biggest strength, the action. The action set pieces and fight scenes in this movie are insane. Now, I will say you should probably tame your expectations a little bit. You're not going to see the Metal Harbor rocket getting launched off. You're not going to see Prison Island blow up. But the stuff that the movie does provide, I think, is just as cool, in my own opinion. But overall, those are my main few positives for the film. Now I'm going to get into the stuff that I was a little bit mixed on or negative on before getting into the spoiler section and what theories I have for the next movie. Okay, to start off, while I do like this movie, its pacing isn't the greatest, and I think the main reason for that is because everything is moving at a lightning fast pace, and it gets to the point where they don't have enough time to flesh out certain things, and scenes just kind of go from action set piece to flashback to action set piece, and I feel like they could have handled that a little bit better, but I would rather have the movie be fast than slow, I can't lie. Another thing I took issue with was the humor. While I do like the humor in this movie and I find it to be funnier than the first 2 movies, I think there are points in the film where the humor kind of gets out of hand and jokes go on for too long, or they kind of undercut an emotional moment, and I feel like they need to balance that better. And my final negative in regards to this movie is the soundtrack. While I think the soundtrack is a lot better than the first 2 movies, I still think we need to see some more experimentation when it comes to the score, and I would like to see a little bit more game music being used within the films themselves. I think this was a good stepping stone to get to that point, but I think they could always do better. And that about wraps up the spoiler-free section of this video. Now's the time to click off because I'm about to go into some major spoilers. But if you don't care about spoilers, then stick around. You have been warned. For starters, I really loved seeing Shadow and Maria's backstory on the big screen, and I loved how their relationship was handled. It felt very sweet and sincere, but also has a very somber tone to it. And I really liked how they didn't stray away from the gun soldiers killing Maria. In this movie, it is handled much differently to the games. Instead of her just being point-blank shot by some soldier, he accidentally shoots his gun off whenever another soldier tries to stop him from firing at them, and it ends up causing an explosion which ends the life of Maria Robotnik. I think this is a good way of going about it, still having her death caused by military negligence while not going too hard on it like the games and other source material did. It's a more tasteful way of showing the backstory, and I'm very much fine with it. Another thing I really loved about this movie was Eggman and Gerald Robotnik. For one, I think Jim Carrey does a really good job portraying both characters. I think Jim Carrey is at his best as Eggman here, but I also really like his take on Gerald. While yes, Gerald does get a little bit goofy, He's still very much a serious character, but he is incredibly different to the Gerald that we see in the games. Gerald kind of acts as a master manipulator in this movie, manipulating Eggman and Shadow and anyone else around him to achieve his goals and ambitions. And Gerald's master plan is that he wants to take the Eclipse Cannon and blow up Earth and himself along with it, because he believes when Maria died and was taken from him by Gunn, that was the day that his family died, and he wants to make humanity pay for it. Which I think is a really good angle to take his character. I also love how the whole movie, Robotnik is desperate for his grandfather's attention and love. And you kind of see Gerald taking advantage of that and trying to make Robotnik believe that he loves him and build this false sense of security, which his heart has absolutely broken whenever Eggman is trying to explain that we don't have to destroy Earth, we can rule it together as a family. And Gerald simply says, "You're no Maria," ultimately crushing Robotnik mentally, which I think is such a cool way of portraying his character, and it gives a lot more development for Eggman, and it's just a really good scene in general. I actually felt goosebumps during that moment. I also really loved Sonic and Shadow's dynamic for the movie. You kind of get the idea that they are two opposing forces just going at it for the entirety of the film, and the Super Sonic versus Super Shadow fight goes incredibly hard. I feel like this movie really gives every character their moment to shine. I also really love the stuff that they did with Agent Stone, Tails, and Knuckles in this movie. Agent Stone feels left behind while the Doctor is trying to pursue his fantasies of having a family, that the Doctor completely abandons Agent Stone behind, and we kind of see how he reacts to this, which I thought was a cool angle to take his character. I also just love seeing Tails and Knuckles work as a team with Sonic. I thought that was really good stuff. Always love seeing Team Sonic interact with each other. Now, I kind of want to talk about the two post-credit scenes that we got at the very end, because there's a lot to unpack there. So the first post-credit scene has Sonic in a dark forest as we are introduced to multiple different versions of Metal Sonic, and then Amy Rose comes in and saves Sonic from the small little army that has surrounded him. Like I said, there is a lot to unpack here. For starters, I'm really happy that we're getting Amy in these movies finally. It's about goddamn time. And while I'm very hyped to see Metal Sonic in the next movie, I actually have a theory as to why they showed multiple different Metal Sonics. I think they're trying to adapt the Metallic storyline from the Fleetway comics, but putting their own spin on it. Which is very interesting for Sonic 4 because it makes me wonder if they're trying to lead into a movie that has Sonic Heroes elements and some Fleetway elements, which would be pretty cool if they decided to maybe take some comic book and video game elements and kind of mix them together for the future movies. I think that would be a really good way of trying to give fans what they want while also doing new things. And while I do love Jim Carrey as Eggman, I don't think we're gonna see him in any future movies, especially because he dies at the end of this one. And since they seem to be taking a little bit here from the comics, it makes me wonder if we could see the introduction of some comic book villains, either through IDW or Archie, or, Fleetway stuff as well. Along with the video game elements that we love so much. And if they take this route, we're gonna have a bunch of movies where we're gonna see some comic book stuff and some video game stuff mixed together, which I definitely think would make a lot of fans happy, including myself. But overall, those are my thoughts on Sonic 3. I definitely think if you're a Sonic fan, you are going to love this movie. Let me know what you thought of the movie down below in the comments, and I will see you in whatever my next project is.